Do you ever lie awake at night, feeling the weight of life pressing down, and wonder if you're truly doing enough? If you're someone who cares too much, that feeling is familiar. It's not just about money, it's about responsibility, about the quiet, constant fear that if you stumble, someone else will feel the impact. By the time you reach your 30s, the world expects you to have figured things out: a career, a relationship, a sense of stability. And if you care too much, that expectation becomes internalized. You measure yourself against it constantly, wondering if your financial life reflects your worth, your effort, your ability to protect and provide. But here's the secret that few admit. The money milestones in your 30s aren't just numbers, they are signals of psychological growth, markers that your care is starting to align with strategy instead of compulsion. The first milestone is stability. It's the quiet, invisible sense of security that comes from paying off debts that have haunted you, building an emergency fund, and understanding that money can't disappear overnight. For people who overcare, this milestone is revolutionary because it rewires the nervous system. Neuroscience tells us that chronic financial stress keeps the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for fear, on high alert, triggering a cascade of anxiety that affects decision-making, sleep, and even relationships. Achieving stability doesn't make life perfect, but it allows your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that plans and reasons, to breathe. Suddenly, you can think long-term instead of reacting constantly. You can care without being consumed. You realize that your worth is not defined by the immediacy of your responses or the number of obligations you shoulder. The second milestone is investment, both in yourself and in your future. By your 30s, it's no longer enough to survive. You need to start growing. For people who care too much, this is the hardest leap because it requires prioritizing your own growth in a world that constantly demands your energy. Behavioral science calls this the paradox of hyper-responsibility. The very traits that make you reliable, empathetic, and driven also make it difficult to allocate resources to yourself. But investing in your skills, your health, your financial literacy, and even in experiences that expand your perspective is transformative. Each dollar, each hour, each intentional choice compounds like interest, not just in wealth, but in emotional resilience, clarity, and capacity to care without self-fear a share. The third milestone is freedom, the ability to make choices without compulsion, fear, or guilt. This doesn't mean extravagance. It means autonomy. It means knowing that your finances are a tool, not a tether, and that your actions can be deliberate rather than reactive. People who care too much often mistake busyness for productivity and overextension for responsibility. Hitting this milestone allows you to distinguish between obligations that are truly yours and expectations imposed by others. It's a subtle but profound psychological shift. You begin to experience the quiet luxury of choice, choosing where to work, who to spend time with, how to allocate resources, and how to care in a way that is sustainable. Neuroscience shows that this sense of autonomy reduces cortisol, restores focus, and allows your nervous system to operate in a state of growth rather than survival. The journey through these milestones is rarely linear. You will stumble. You will question yourself. You will feel the pull of old habits: overspending to prove worth, overgiving to maintain approval, overextending to ensure others' safety. These patterns are not flaws. They are evidence of how deeply wired your care is. But the milestones themselves act as signposts, gently reminding you that overcaring does not have to equal oversacrificing, that the energy you expend on others can be matched by the care you give yourself, that financial growth is not just about wealth, it's about maturity, self-trust, and emotional intelligence. There is a quiet darkness in these realizations. You may grieve the years when your nervous system ran on anxiety, when your heart carried obligations it never owed, when your care was unsustainable. Yet within that grief is liberation. You start to understand that financial milestones are not merely external achievements, they are reflections of inner alignment. Stability signals that your care has boundaries. Investment signals that your priorities honor both self and others. Freedom signals that your nervous system can trust you to act with intention rather than compulsion. And when you see this pattern, the numbers on a bank statement or the balance of your accounts become mirrors, not measures, of worth. The cinematic truth of your 30s is subtle. There is no sudden liberation, no dramatic transformation in a single night. Instead, there is a rhythm that emerges from repeated, deliberate choices, each decision saving a percentage, investing in your health. Honoring boundaries is a quiet act of rebellion against the compulsion to overcorrect for fear or obligation. It's in these small, consistent actions that transformation occurs. You may not notice it daily, but over time, your mind, your body, and your heart adapt. Caring too much becomes a strength instead of a burden because it is guided by awareness rather than anxiety. And here is the emotional heart of it. By the time you reach these milestones, you begin to feel worthy, not because of the numbers, not because of external validation, but because you have learned to honor the very parts of yourself that care. You realize that your empathy, your vigilance, your foresight are gifts that can be directed without depleting your energy. Money, once a source of stress and proof, becomes a tool to cultivate choice, stability, and growth. Your 30s are not about keeping pace with societal expectations. They're about aligning your resources, emotional, mental, and financial with the person you truly want to become. So tonight, as you reflect in the quiet of your own thoughts, ask yourself this: what would it mean to approach your 30s not as a checklist of achievements, but as a map of milestones that honor both your care and your freedom? What if the true measure of success wasn't how much you provided for others, but how well you learned to care for yourself while still giving? Because the real wealth of your 30s, the kind that transforms everything, is not in your bank account. It's in the wisdom, the resilience, and the quiet clarity you cultivate while learning to care deeply without losing yourself.